That's awesome. All right, well, here we go. It's 10. I'm just going to start if that's all right.
Yep.
Kind of going through some logistics here. So my name is Hannah McCarthy. Thank you all so much for joining this morning. I am a committee woman here in the Westchester area, and I'm excited to serve Chester County. And this is a town hall that you showed up for with the John Emmons campaign. So this is going to be a super exciting one. I'm really stoked about this one. So a few ground rules on this. So we're trying to keep this as noiseless as possible, maybe. So that means please mute your screens. You can use the chat feature in your Zoom account to ask questions and to kind of interact with the campaign. So let me take out, stop sharing real fast. There we go, perfect. So if you're on your Zoom screen and you want to ask a question, then you just kind of hover your cursor down to the bottom and you should see a chat bubble. And when you click that, you can type in any of your questions for John. I will be monitoring the chat, and so if you have questions along the way, please just type them in and I'll be able to kind of populate those and ask during the Q&A session. So if everyone is all set with that, then I will begin to introduce our wonderful candidate for Congress. So John Emmons is a candidate for Congress for District 6, so that is our Chester County here. His background is in manufacturing and operations all over, and he has a bachelor's in science from SUNY. He has been serving Chester County as committeeman as well as area chair for Area 28. I'm super excited to introduce him today. John, this is all you, so I'll hand it over to you.
All righty. Thank you very much, Hannah. Thank you for hosting these. And Hannah's got a big job to do because she's got to watch all the chats, all the questions, and then kind of aggregate those into questions to feed to me. So it's wonderful to have her do this. It takes a big load off of us. So let me start with a warm welcome. Thank you for being here again today. Saturday morning isn't always easy for everyone, but thank you for showing. I'll start. Hannah's already introduced me, but yes, I'm John Emmons, running for the PA 6, and I'm standing up for the promise of America. I think that's key for people to really know, and you'll hear a little bit more about that a little later here in the town hall. But I also want to encourage you to stand with me. It's vital that we as Americans stand for what we believe and make that actionable. So again, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's absolutely vital that we stand up for this country. With regard to the meeting this morning, I'm hoping that we don't have any sound issues on my end. Our neighbor across the street is actually getting a siding job done, and they weren't able to finish it yesterday, so they're over there working today. So there's occasional hammers, and there's an air compressor that runs occasionally, so hopefully that doesn't become a distraction for us. This is also looking back at this last week. It's been a big week for the Emmons family. Last Sunday, for those of you who don't know, last Sunday, Allison and I celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary, and that was quite a milestone in our lives. We were able to celebrate it with our children, all three. Very fortunate to have them nearby, along with their spouses and children. So last Saturday afternoon and early evening was a wonderful time. Also, a couple other notable things from the Emmons family for this past week. Our oldest daughter, who is expecting, is now just 4 weeks away from her delivery date. So another week has gone by. And as you know, as every week goes by, you start to breathe a little easier So we're getting close now. Her due date's around August 10th. So that's moving along. And our younger daughter actually moved out on Thursday. She recently got a job up towards Harrisburg, and that's quite a commute. So she rented an apartment up in that area. So the funny thing about that is I think that's either the third or fourth time that we've moved into the empty nest mode, because they keep coming back, which we love, and then they're off again. But we are blessed the fact that all three of our children now are literally within an hour of us. It doesn't happen much these days. So we feel blessed, and we just cherish every day that they are that close to us. From the campaign standpoint, just a couple of quick points from the campaign standpoint. It's been another busy week. A couple notable things that happened just the last day or so. We received word yesterday that we received the endorsement from the National Right to Life Committee, or PAC. So that's a major endorsement. So we're very appreciative of that. And then ironically, within a couple hours of that, we were notified that we got the endorsement of the PA Pro-Life Federation. So that was also good. And there's more of those coming. So again, a busy week for the campaign. What's notable now is that we're less than 4 months away. You can think of it about 3.5 months from now, we'll be making this major decision as a district, obviously as a country, and so forth. So time is moving on. We're very, very busy. Things are going well, but we've got a lot of work to do between now and November. Before I jump into the major topic for the day, I wanted to spend a minute just talking a little bit about COVID-19. It continues to bubble somewhat in the news. I think we've all seen the stories about how the cases are increasing down in the southern states. That's starting to get even airtime up here. I think the key point is that, yes, the cases have increased. I think we realize why they have increased, but what typically isn't communicated is that the rate of hospitalization or rate of mortality has actually fallen, continues to fall. And I think what that is we now have a much better understanding of how to deal with it and to keep those who are vulnerable separated. And I think we're doing a very good job with that. And I think we've also seen that the majority of new cases are in the younger set, ages 20 to say 35 or 40, because they're getting back out, and especially in the South, as you go to a bar, you go to a restaurant, it's very hot there. You go inside, you have air conditioning. That air conditioning is circulating air, and it's not that much different from being on a subway in New York in February. So I think we understand what's happening. I think we as a total entity, we are going to be able to control that. And I think we just have to remind ourselves the good practices that we've learned over the last 3 months, if we continue to exercise those, all will be okay. We need to continue to push to open up the economies. There's many issues around not only financial, but even more so health, people's mental health and what have you. So we got to open the economy. We can do it successfully. We need to be smart about it. So I think one of the key points I wanted to make, though, is I think we will continue to see this in the papers, but I have a sneaking suspicion that as of November 4th, we will probably start to hear much less of it. When it can't be leveraged into some agenda, I believe that to a large degree it will go away. We still need to be very concerned about it, follow the right things, but I think we'll have a different view of it come November. So that's just my editorial comment on that, and I'll move on then. My message for a long time now has been encapsulated in 3 words: security, freedom, and opportunity. And I chose those because everything that I'm talking about falls under those three categories. So I will continue to talk about, I think they are absolutely key that we talk about them. And I think in many ways, it's a major differentiator in this race. But I think when you stop and you think about it, when you think about all the very positive things that come from freedom and opportunity, if you don't have the security as a foundation, then it's very difficult to move to freedom and to opportunity. So I think one of the things you'll hear me say today is I think some of the security issues that have been brought more to our attention here in the past 4 or 5 months, I think we took a number of those things for granted. But very clearly, if we don't have that base of security, then it's hard to feel free when you have major concerns about security. It's hard to pursue your dreams and pursue opportunities if you're concerned about security. So security is core, it's important. So yes, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk about it a lot, and it'll be one of the issues for this election. First, before I dive in any deeper to security, I wanted to take just a moment and read the definitions, a couple definitions of security. We all know what it is, but it's good to just refresh that at times. 3 definitions for you. 1, the state of being free from danger or threat. Makes sense? Number 2, freedom from fear or anxiety. That one probably hits closer to home, but it certainly makes sense to all of us. Number 3, safety and certainty. So I think those all make sense. We all understand that. We understand security. And as you stop and you think about security, the opposite of security, that fear and anxiety, that is one of the most basic human emotions that we feel. That's one of the things that makes us human, is that our sense of fear and anxiety. So yes, we need security. Security is vital to our existence. It's one of what I would say is one of the core needs of us as humans. So yes, it strikes very close to the heart when our security is threatened or we have a sense that it no longer exists as we knew it before. And when you think about it with security, if you don't have it, then what happens? Well, in the least sense, we are distracted by it. We put energy into that. In a more extreme case, we are consumed by it. If it's significant enough, we tend to think about it. We tend to worry about it. It tends to dominate our life. So it's very, very important. And I think it's got to be one of the core issues that we're thinking about and making decisions about. Why focus on it? I just talked about that. With the events of the last 4 or 5 months, people's security has really been shaken. Now, I talked about that a little bit last week, but it has been shaken. I think we took a lot of that security for granted. We probably don't quite so much right now, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But when I talk to people, and I've been talking to tons of people, especially since mid-May, as people started to come out of COVID-19, what I was getting from virtually every person was a range of emotions that dealt with security. And I think I've mentioned this before on other town halls, that those emotions range on the mild end of concern up to people being alarmed. And then from there, even people being terrified. When you're talking to someone and they tell you that they're terrified with what's going on, that is really something significant. But that's what I've been getting from people. So if anything, that's made me all the more in tune with those emotions that we're all dealing with. I think the other thing to be thinking about is what is that anxiety? What is that fear do to us as people? I think we all would say that fear and anxiety is something that's not good. It's unhealthy. When you think about what that does to us physically, mentally, emotionally, it has a big impact on us. Stress has a way of impacting our immune systems. You tend to get more sick. you have heart issues. Many issues come from those types of stresses and anxieties. So it's paramount that we don't let this situation persist, and we do something to reduce that and bring back a sense of security and real security. So I think another perspective that we may not think about very often, but when we think about security and what I just described, folks, that's not what we signed up for. And when I say that's not what we signed up for, what do I mean? Well, when you think about it, we have a solemn covenant or a solemn commitment or an implied contract with government that we go through our lives, we pay our taxes, and it's the responsibility of local, state, and federal government to help provide safety and security. I think you'd all agree with that. And yet, that's not what's happening right now. Government is not living up to their end of the bargain in total. So in some cases, in some places, they're actually doing the opposite. They're actually enabling the lawlessness that we see, and actually in some cases I think they're encouraging it. And that breaks that contract that we have with them. That's a key part of our that solemn commitment that we have with our government. So that has to stop. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's something that's key, absolutely key, and that's got to stop. I talked about the personal or the various forms of security that we all have, and maybe we did take some of those for granted. As I've been thinking about this the last 2 days, I thought, yeah, we had been secure so long that we probably do take some of these for granted. So I just wanted to run through some of these just to kind of remind ourselves. So from a very basic standpoint, the most basic security that we need beyond oxygen is food and water and certain necessities. And we saw like the snowstorm effect back at the beginning, the early days of COVID-19. We had the rush on the supermarkets and what have you. We'd go and the shelves would be, at least the good food would be there. So we got to experience that a little bit. But I think some of us also came out of this with maybe a little bit more of an appreciation for such basic things as toilet paper. If you remember, all of a sudden there was no toilet paper around. So it just reminds you that there are basic needs that we take for granted, but maybe we shouldn't always. I think more importantly to an extent is health. And many times we assume our healthcare system, but in the case of COVID-19, what happened? Well, there was a virus, and the virus led us to think, well, am I going to get sick? Am I going to be hospitalized? If I do, will I survive it? That brought a whole mortality to us, and how's that going to affect us? But then beyond that, there were concerns about, am I going to be able to get the medical attention I need? Am I able to continue on with my chemotherapy, or do I have to stop? And what are the implications of that? I was due for a heart procedure, and now that's been canceled. And you've heard examples of all those things, elective surgeries. I needed to have this done. Now I can't have elective surgery. So there's many aspects of health that all of a sudden started to be brought into question. One of those was this supply chain issue when we found out that most of our pharmaceuticals, all of our antibiotics are made elsewhere. So all of a sudden there was a question about, can I even get the medications that I need? So health was something that was cast up to us in a very dramatic way. Also from a family standpoint, when you think about the impact that this has all had on our families, concern about our parents, what happens if they contract COVID-19? Our grandparents, are they being cared for properly, whether they're at home or if they're in a facility someplace? Also, I mean, as simple as your spouse, what happens if my spouse gets this? Even striking closer to home with a lot of people is the whole advent of the schools shutting down and kids being sent home. Then all of a sudden you had these issues about all of a sudden mom or dad had to become the teacher. And am I qualified to be a teacher? Can I help my child the way they need to be helped in regard to the education that is rolling forward over these months? In a similar way, if I'm watching the kids, can I keep my job? Can I continue to put food on the table? How do I balance both? All those things have been challenges for people over the last 3 or 4 months. Now, projecting that forward, there's still a lot of questions and uncertainties about what happens this fall. Are the kids going to be able to go back to school? Are they not? If they go back to school, is it going to be on a part-time basis and I still have to stay home? Can I go back to my job? All those things are out there still bubbling, causing concern, anxiety, and a loss of security. So those are real issues that people are really struggling with right now. From a financial standpoint, similar things, loss of jobs or having to shut down your business. Those obviously are very important things. Am I able to pay my bills? Am I able to put food on the table? Am I able to pay my mortgage? Those are all critical. And if I am a business owner and I have all these employees, many very loyal employees, what about them? What about their families? Those are all things that create great anxiety and fear in people. And when you think about the jobs and the businesses, people spend years, sometimes decades of their life building those careers, building their businesses. And what really hurts in this situation is we have the situation where much of what we have felt, especially the long term, I think we said we all agree that early on in March and early April, yes, there needed to be a shutdown for us to reassess. After that, now we're dealing with the result of arbitrary decisions and, quite honestly, political maneuvering on certain governors' parts that have hurt us and in some ways continue to hurt us. So those are all things that erode our security and have a huge impact on our life. And the worst thing about this is it's nothing that you did. You were living your life, doing what you're supposed to do, and all of a sudden this took place. And quite honestly, going back to my earlier point, they broke that covenant and that commitment of government. And they're doing it, I believe, in some cases, probably more so than we really know, for political posturing and maneuvering. And that is a very sad day in this country when people will do that. They will put people through this kind of pain and strain just for political purposes. But I believe that's where we're at. One other one is property and home. So I think, as you all saw, we had the protests. And I think I will fight to my last breath to defend the First Amendment and the right to assemble, the freedom of speech. So do I support protest? Absolutely. But what I don't support, never will support, are the riots, the looting, the lawlessness, the occupations, the tearing down of statues, the police being told by their hierarchy, the mayors and the commissioners, not to stop them, just let them go. The calls to defund the police, those to me, that's inappropriate. It's unacceptable. That can't happen. It should not happen. And that all that does is lead to more and more concern on our part, the security. I think many of you, I've talked to a lot of people that when there was that 5,000 person protest in Westchester, that had a huge impact on people. I've talked to a number of people who literally sat in their garage all afternoon and all night with a loaded weapon on their lap because they were very concerned that that was going to bubble over out of the central Westchester and come out into the neighborhoods. So that really impacted people. Another indication of that was, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who up until about 4 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, didn't own a gun, And secondly, we're not necessarily very strong supporters of the Second Amendment. But the people that talk to me now, all of a sudden, they have gone out and they purchased not just one weapon, in many cases, a couple weapons, because of what they've seen over the past few months. The fact that these things can occur, and that in some cases the police either can't or won't respond. So what do? You have to take matters into your own hands for your own defense. That's what people have done. Those are very weighty things. And why are people doing that? Because their security has been totally shaken, and they have to respond, and they have responded in this way. So I think that's all just underscores where people are right now with regard to security. And life is just an extension of that. People literally are fearing for their life. And at the same time, they're wondering, what happened to the country that I knew? They're shaken by the fact that things have changed so quickly. What happened to this country that I knew? On a kind of a separate note, all those things I talked about, we're talking about personal security. From a national security standpoint, if you roll back the clock about 6 months, national security was probably what most people were thinking about. Now it's actually secondary. So that's just how quickly things changed, because it became more personal with all these things that I talked about. But from a national security standpoint, from an internal, you have internal and external. From an internal standpoint, we have this unrest that we see, and I would question that. I would say we had unrest for several weeks after the killing of George Floyd. We all understand that. But then since then, what we've seen is chaos and anarchy, plain and simple. Now, one thing you'll note is you haven't seen a lot of that in the news the last 2 weeks, because it's become unpopular with the American people. So what's the media do? They hide it, but it's still there. If you know where to look, you will see the chaos and the anarchy that goes on. And why is that going on? Well, no news to probably most of the people on this town hall. What certain people want is a revolution. And how do you get a revolution? You help, you fan the flames of chaos and anarchy. And as people become more fearful, you write in and offer them some form of security. They want fundamental transformation. Fundamental transformation to what? I think in my mind, the bottom line here is that we have people that are instigating this. I'll refer to them as puppeteers, because I think they're taking advantage of a lot of people who think they're doing the right thing, but they're just basically puppets of these puppeteers. And what do the puppeteers want? They want enhanced power, and they will stop at nothing to get that enhanced power. And that's what we're seeing. And in some cases, we see that manifested as also socialism or Marxism. But that's what we're seeing internally. And I think many of us see that, we're concerned about that, and that's causing us a real concern around security going forward, because we've continued to see this. Now we see being ramped up and really enabled in many places. Externally, I'll just touch on a couple things very quickly. Supply chain, we've seen that. I've talked about it for the last 3 months. We woke up one day and found that we were relying too much on countries like China. We found that we were dependent upon them for many things, whether it be pharmaceuticals, medical devices, aspects of our energy complex, our agricultural complex, huge impact on technology, and even things like rare earth minerals, which has a big implication across our industries, including national defense. So I've talked a lot in the past about the need to bring manufacturing back. I won't repeat all that, but that remains another concern in the back of people's minds. And then one last thing, we have the traditional concerns about some of our adversaries. China continues to talk about world domination, and they have a long-term view. And we see and we feel some of that. We've just witnessed what they're doing in Hong Kong. They just continue to press and press. So that continues to be a challenge. We also, Iran is not out of the picture. They are the sponsors of terrorism, and I think we probably all believe they are still working to create a nuclear capability. You have North Korea, who is probably working to create a nuclear capability. And we can't forget about Russia. Russia is out there. They're in their own way, they're interested in growing power, their own form of world domination with communism, et cetera, et cetera. So those are all still out there, but they've kind of taken a back seat right now to the more personal things. So I'll pause there. That's enough of that, probably too much, but it's very deep. It's a very heavy subject, but I wanted to talk about it because it is vitally important. But I also want to pass on a message of hope. I really believe that there is a lot of hope. I think people are seeing these things, and I think people are asking themselves a lot of questions about what is going on? How did we get here? Where do we need to go? And I think that will manifest itself during the election this fall. I really do. And I think the key point is that we hold the key. We hold the key. We're the ones who vote. I believe very strongly in a silent majority. And I think right now that silent majority is more silent than normal because of all the political correctness, the cancel culture, all of that. We are more silent than normal, but I also believe we're more of a majority than ever. But we'll only know on November 3rd or whatever day that they finish counting all the mail-in ballots. But again, it's up to us. It's up to we the people. We the people need to stand up for the promise of America. If we do, then we will get this country back on the right path. If we don't, I don't even want to think about what will happen. But keep it positive. I believe that people are there. I believe people will stand up. They'll stand up between now and November, and I think they'll come out in droves in November because they don't want to see their country go down the drain. And they're seeing way too much of all the things I mentioned, and that will help bring them to the polls. Now, just to kind of finish up here a little bit, there's things that we can do, and I want to touch on those as part of this whole topic around security. I think first and foremost, we need to support law and order. And I'm serious about that. Support law and order. Beyond that, we need to insist on law and order. We need to demand law and order. This business that we've been seeing, not quite so much locally, but across the country, it's just wrong. And we need to step up and have our voices be heard. We need to push back on the lunacy of this defund the police. That's not the right approach. We need to support the police. I mentioned that. We need to support law enforcement. We need to learn where there's opportunities for improvement and put those things in place, the methodologies and what have you. That's what we need to be doing, not defunding. So we need to make that better. The other thing we need to do, a second thing, I talk about this frequently, we need to open the economy. We need to get people back to work. We need to get people back to a near normal lifestyle. We need the certainty of that in order for people to feel good and to start to reduce that anxiety and that fear. So we need to do that from a business standpoint, and maybe even more importantly, from a school standpoint. We have that coming up here in the near-term horizon. We need to figure out how to get our children back in their schools safely, but we need to get back to that as part of that near normal life. So that's critical, that not be a political weapon, but we look to what's beneficial, most beneficial for the kids, for the families. We need to do that. I've talked a lot about growing the economy. This is more of a long-term thing, but this is really the elixir that will help on so many fronts. Growing the economy, bringing good jobs, manufacturing jobs back to the US, help resolve this supply chain issue, but also build stronger communities. One manufacturing job generates 4 other jobs in the community. We need that. We need the assurance that we can have the products we need locally and not have to depend on someone halfway around the world to provide us with that. So that's the third one. The fourth one, I think, is the most important. So I'm actually going to say this twice. I'll warn you that I'm going to say this twice. Elect people who will build up and multiply versus those who divide and tear down. So stop and think about that. We need to elect people who will build up, raise people up, multiply, as opposed to those who are intent on dividing, pitting one person against another and tearing things down. It's a much different, I mean, we have a very clear choice to make here coming up. Do we want to raise people up, lift people up, create opportunities for people, or do we want to continue to divide people and pit one person against another and tear things down? One is very positive, one's very negative. It should be a clear choice. I'm confident that choice will be made in November. We have to work at it. So my message to you is don't accept what's going on today. And I know many of you aren't, many of you are speaking up, but don't accept what's going on today, especially here in the PA6 district. Don't accept what I'll refer to as the misdirected representation of Representative Houlihan. She pulled a bait and switch on the people of the PA6. She claimed that she was a moderate, that she would be bipartisan and reach across the aisle. But when you look at what she's done, she's landed firmly on with the radical left and with Nancy Pelosi. And the evidence is clear. She's voted with Nancy Pelosi 100% of the time. So there is no argument there. So we now know, we have her record, we know what she really is, what she really stands for. So that leads into the whole point about security and about the fact that this covenant, this commitment, this solemn commitment that we have has been violated. So my opinion is we need to hold her accountable. How do we hold her accountable? Elect me in November, because I will fight for law and order. I will fight every day for the police and for law enforcement. I will work every day, and I work long days. I will work every day for security, for freedom, and for opportunity. It is absolutely vital. We need that. This country needs it. This world needs that. So yes, I'm standing up for the promise of America, and I hope you will stand with me. It's going to take all of us. It's within our reach. It's what we need to do. We'll work hard between now and November, and God willing, we will have a good outcome in November and get this country back on the right path again. So let me pause there, draw a breath, and I'll hand the meeting back over to Hannah, and we can see what questions have come in.
Awesome, thank you so much. And now for the fun part, right? All the questions and answers. Well, the fun part for me is asking the questions.
Q&A, so I'm all for it.
Perfect. Okay, so we have a question here. What do you believe is the most significant security risk we face?
Well, I think in the short term, the most significant risk is this somehow this belief that we can pick and choose with regard to law and order. We can't do that. The rule of law is one of the basic tenets of society, and we can't pick and choose which laws we're going to enforce and what we're going to do. So I think in the shortest term, I think that's what we need to be able to have law and order. That's we have to have that security I've been talking about. So I think there's other things we need to do longer term. Some of the things I mentioned around the economy. I think one of the longer term things that we don't talk a lot about, but we need to seriously look at our education system, because I think it's fair to say that for a couple generations now, we have let our children down. We we haven't been active enough in the education process, and we've allowed our children to be heavily influenced by people on the left with their propaganda and what have you. And I think that's one of the major challenges to the country, because as you know, I've seen places where they say that you develop your worldview between the ages of 3 and 13. So all those children who have been indoctrinated with a certain thought process, how do you ever reverse that? I don't know. It's a tough question, but I think longer term, that's something we need to deal with, because we can't continue to let our children be educated the way that they have been for the last couple generations.
Yeah, for sure. Which is, it's quite scary, you know? Thank you. I have another question here. So, nice and spicy, I like it. So, do you really believe President Biden would support defunding the police?
That's a scary term. just the word President Biden kind of sends shivers up and down.
Possible president.
Well, I think there's been some debate about that the last few days in the news. What was said, what was not said. But I think from his own lips, I think he made the statement that he would redirect money from the police. Well, to me, that's just political speech. If you say publicly that you will redirect funds from the police, in essence, you're defunding them. So I think what we've seen with Mr. Biden is that he is bending to the pressure of the left. I don't know how many people know this, but do you know who the second most prolific fundraiser is for the Democrats? Number 1 is Nancy Pelosi. Who's number 2? AOC. So between her pull from the left and the fact that she's a prolific fundraiser, she is having a heavy influence on the Democrat Party and Joe Biden. So if that's what their intent is, then I believe, yes, that he will in one way, shape, or form support the defunding of law enforcement.
Oh man.
Yep.
Talk about scary things, you know. Good morning, happy Saturday.
Elections have consequences, and that's what we all understand more and more now with every passing week and month.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, here we have, historically, when people feel threatened, they are willing to give up freedoms for greater security. Is this happening now?
I think going back to my commentary about chaos and anarchy, I think the attempt is happening now, because it kind of goes back to Saul Alinsky and the rules for radicals and how you make change. It kind of builds on Rahm Emanuel's that, you know, never let a crisis go untapped, if you will. And I think this crisis happened, and I think they're perpetuating it. My belief, though, is that that has happened in the past. When people feel threatened, when they feel fear, they are prone, they're more willing to give up freedoms, and they think maybe at the time it's only temporary, but once that is made, do you ever go back? Typically not. But in my mind, true freedom, you need security for true freedom. And what I mean by that is, think about it. If, as I said earlier, if you're concerned about your security, are you really free? Do you feel free? No, you don't feel free. So in my mind, in order to truly have security, you need to have the freedom, and that comes with our freedom, that freedom generating the right kind of security. So I hope enough of us get that we push hard for security, that begets freedom, begets opportunity, and we don't succumb to what the left is saying, is that here is the issue and we have the answer for it, but you have to give up certain freedoms for that. So at one of these town halls, we'll go into healthcare, because in healthcare, in a way, you saw a little bit of that with the Affordable Care Act, that we'll give you better healthcare security, but you're going to have to give up some of your choices and some of your freedom there. And look how that's turned out. That's a topic for a different day, but we don't have to give up our freedom for security.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a very good point. I have a few more here. People in urban areas have faced security issues forever. What would Congressman Emmons do to address that systemic issue?
That's an age-old issue. I think that goes on as long as people have aggregated into cities, going back to the beginning of man. But I think as I think about, I've been thinking about this now for about 50 years. How do we ever solve the problem of population density and some of the inherent issues of the urban environment? And I really think, in my mind, it comes down to, well, the top three things that I think we need to look very closely at. One is we need to look at enhancing the economies of in or around the cities, because you need to have jobs. People need to have jobs. If people don't have jobs, on the one hand, you have financial issues, you have self-esteem issues, all those. So, part of my thought of bringing manufacturing back, hopefully we do that. Then some of those factories go near cities. In some cases, with high tech, can go in cities. We've seen the success of economic zones. So I think that's one thing we need to do, is to promote the growth of the economy and have that help out to cities. I think another thing, which kind of goes back to my commentary about education, I am a strong proponent of school choice. Every child needs to have a good education. And I think one of the benefits of school choice, it gives parents, especially in urban areas, and I say that very specifically because out here more in the suburbs or in the rural areas, school choice is probably more difficult. But in the urban areas, probably where it's needed the most, people need the ability to get their kids to a good school. And it may take people migrating away from certain schools in order to get their attention that they need to improve. So the second thing, I would be a very strong proponent of school choice and push that. The third one is a little deeper issue, but I think that what we need to do is to take a hard look at our laws, the IRS laws and what have you, and in essence, return to the point where there is more of an incentive for there to be a family headed by two people than one. We've all seen the statistics. We've all seen what happens with a single, and it's not universal, but when you look at families that are headed by a single individual, it's very hard for a parent to do that. Many stresses, many strains, and we've seen statistics. I've seen things here recently where back in 1950, when 11% of children in cities were born to a single parent, now it's 70%. And when you look at the various statistics around education, crime, et cetera, children that come from a single family home tend to have 4 to 9 times the issues that a child that comes from a traditional family. So I think we need to re-incentivize that type of family structure, and because all the data, all of our experience shows that it promotes a better environment for children.
Awesome, thank you so much.
That's a deep one too.
That one's a good one though, I like it. I have a few more here. In terms of personal and family financial security, how do you feel about simplifying the tax code?
I love it. I'm very much and I would simplify it as much as we possibly can. I would love to see one tax rate. I would actually, this will probably get me in trouble at some point, but I was a proponent of the fair tax because I feel that I think there's a lot of issues with the current tax system. I'll try to keep this brief, but the current tax system that based on income tax, it provides the federal government going in, extracting money, and then making you beg to get it back. But one of the other things it does with the income tax, it also hides about 20% of the economy. What do I mean by that? Well, roughly 20% of the economy isn't taxed under the income tax. Because think about it, the cash society and the illegal society, they don't pay income taxes. So one of the beauties of the fair tax, which was really more of a type of a sales tax, if you bought if you were, say you were a drug pusher, if you went and bought a washer or dryer, yeah, you were going to pay a tax on it. You're not going to pay that. So I think we need to simplify it, try to get to a lower tax rate. And I also, the other aspect of simplifying it is to get rid of loopholes. There's too many entities, whether it be individuals or even corporations, that don't pay their fair share because they have used their lobbying power. They have carved out niches in the tax code, and we've all seen the stories of these huge corporations that don't pay a penny. That needs to stop. People need to pay, and I think a nice, simple, flat tax pegged at the right level would be a wonderful advancement.
Thank you. I have one here. How are you keeping in touch with and getting your message out to the voters in the cities of the 6th district?
I think that remains a challenge for us. In the cities, we had started to work in that direction back in at least like in Reading, for example, back in December. And then we were gearing up to get back into that again in March when COVID-19 hit. And quite honestly, we've been able to do fairly little in regard, because that takes getting people together. And now that we are through June, we're now looking at going back to cities and reaching out to leaders in those communities and meeting with them and being able to talk to them and understand. I think the key is to listen. I was very much impressed back in December when I sat down with some leaders up in Reading, because they told me something I wasn't anticipating. They said that our #1 issue is access to capital. I thought it would be immigration or something like that, but it's actually access to capital. And there's many entrepreneurs in those communities. They want access to capital to grow businesses and to employ others. So I guess the short answer is we are just now starting to reach back out, and hopefully the COVID-19 will remain in check so that people feel comfortable meeting again. The core of it is meeting with people.
Yeah, for sure. A lot more coming in, which is awesome. If you were in Washington, well, let me back up. A small percentage of people seem to be winning in their effort to take down our republic. Our way of life is a constitutional republic. I don't understand why Trump and Republicans, others, are allowing this to happen. If you were in Washington, what actions as a congressman would you be taking to stop the effort to destroy our America and stopping it now?
Well, I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about different government entities have different powers. And I know, I've thought here for the last 3 months, what would I do if I was in Donald Trump's situation? It's the responsibility of the states and the mayors to maintain control, but ultimately it's the responsibility of the president to help defend the people in the country from internal and external threats. So I think as much as possible, I think we would need to work with those local authorities and what I was saying earlier, insist on and demand law enforcement. It's easier said than done, because you go to the question of what authority do you have over them from a congressional standpoint. Ultimately, you have the power of the purse, and you could threaten to defund them. But the problem there is that takes a lot of time to do. So I think what you would try to do is to use your bully pulpit and really talk to the people in that area and insist that they do uphold law and order. And you're somewhat limited, and but I think I think the answer is easier what you would do longer term, because I think the things that I've talked about, you put them in place and they provide the foundation for those things longer term. Shorter term, it's a much more difficult, and you have to rely on government to play their role, to live up to their commitment to provide you with safety and security. And if they're not, we all need to beat the drum loudly and force or shame them into doing their job.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I have a question here. With internet being crucial for school children, how do we get internet for inner city children without it becoming a welfare issue? Kind of a little off topic, but interesting.
Well, I think from what I understand, I don't know all the ins and outs of this, but I think we're seeing more and more situations where there's companies that actually are providing computers to students. So I think it's a combination. In some places, well, I'd look at this a couple different ways. Me being the person I am, the first thing I would do is go in and say, let me see your budget. Let me see where all your money is being spent. For example, I think I have these numbers right, at least they're right directionally. In the city of Philadelphia, I think they spend about $23,000 per student. Out here in the burbs, I think the number is more like 11 to 13,000. So you have to step back and you say, well, why does it take $10,000 more per student in Philadelphia? What's really happening there? But I would first look to see where the money is being spent and see, computers aren't all that expensive. So can you redirect money from something that really is not of any value at all and direct it to this? I would much prefer to do that. I'm not a government spending person. I would not rush out and say, well, let's run up a bill and let's create $100 billion project to buy kids computers. I really believe the money's there, and the people need to spend their money wisely. And I think they are, from what I've seen in newspapers over the last year or so. You have companies that are actually giving the kids computers. So you put all that together, there is a solution there. You just have to get at it. But I don't think the solution is just throwing money at it. I think there's plenty of money being thrown at it already. It just needs to be directed in the right area.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, I have a question. I realize this is a bit off topic from security, but do you support the fair tax without the repeal of the 16th Amendment? Do you have concerns that we would end up with both a federal income and federal sales tax?
Yes. I would not want to have a dual system. I would not trust politicians to, if the politicians, and if I'm one of them, if they came to me and said, look, let's put the fair tax in, which in essence would be a national sales tax, and then we'll phase out the other one over time, I would oppose that because I don't trust them. I would want to see something that was irreversible and that that Congress couldn't change, similar to the way they've changed so many things over the last 50 years. But, you know, as I've thought about this over time, I think the solution's already there. Now, follow me on this one. You have, with what that question was, you have your income tax or you have a sales tax. To me, the perfect solution would be reduce the size of the federal government. We want government to be at the state and local level. Well, guess what, folks? We already have the sales tax provision at the state level. So I know I'm oversimplifying this, but if you reduce the size of the federal government, you push that responsibility back to the states and local, you extract less money from the states, let people keep their money. What are they going to do with that money? They're going to buy things. When they buy things, what happens? The state's going to have more revenue. So, and to me, it seems like almost a perfect solution to consciously reduce the size of federal government, push that back to the states, let the states run things more effectively and what makes sense to them. One size doesn't fit all for all these 50 states. And then by doing that, what you would in essence do, you would transition over more to a balanced income tax and sales tax, but it would be at the state level, not at the national level. So what intrigues me about that is there's already a mechanism in place. We don't have to create something new. We might have to change the rates a little bit, but we don't need to create a whole new infrastructure. It's already there, and it's all created by reducing the size of the federal government. Have them focus on what they're supposed to be focused on, things like national defense and safety and protection and security, and not on everything that they can possibly get their hands into our lives with.
Absolutely. So I think that kind of wraps up the questions here. We're kind of running out of time anyway, so this is a good stopping point, and I'll hand it back over to you. But first, I wanted to say thank you, everybody who joined in this morning with your coffee, with your breakfast, for taking the time today. And thank you, John, for being here and for running.
Well, thank you, Hannah. Thanks for hosting. I know you have a lot on your plate, but we really appreciate you getting on and hosting. And folks, thank you for getting on. Everyone's busy these days, but I do appreciate it. And remember, if you can't get on, we have all of our past town halls on our YouTube channel, campaign channel. So if you miss any of them, just go on YouTube and in the search bar, just type in Emmons for Congress and it'll come right up. And you can review any of the past town halls as well as other videos that we've made. And we'll just continue to add to that, add content to it as we go through the course of the next 3 or 4 months. So that as well. Next weekend, I think the topic will be freedom, security, freedom, opportunity. So I think you can expect next week will be freedom. And, you know, curiously, next weekend is July 18th. And 62 years ago, on July 18th, I was born. So next Saturday is my birthday. And so I look forward to sharing a piece of that with you. And we'll delve into freedom. So thank you for the questions. They're really great questions, very insightful. I know I go on. I continue to try to work on that, but thank you and keep those coming. And also, you know, if you have questions during the course of the week, feel free to send them through the website. Many of you have my personal email. Don't hesitate, send them. There's very few that we don't get to answer literally within 12 to 24 hours. There's occasionally there will be a humdinger that comes in that will say, let's pass on that one, but that's like 1 out of 1,000. So keep the cards and letters coming, and we'll make sure that we are very responsive. Because again, this is this whole campaign. It's a candidate interview, if you will. I'm interviewing for a job. I'm working for you. I need to be responsive to you. So never hesitate, and even don't hesitate to call me as well. So let's keep the communication link up as strong as possible. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and hopefully you're able to get back on next week.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.